Good afternoon, everyone. Using thingy in community services. We've struggled for 3 years with what to call thingy, and I knew if I didn't call it anything else in this presentation, I'd keep stumbling. I actually ran a competition with our staff and volunteers to ask them to name the units, because the DRTS and all the official titles just didn't cut it for us. And I got a whole host of different suggestions, including one that said, my touchy-feely friend, which you can read into it two ways, and we decided probably wasn't a very good idea. So we're going to stick with thingy. Oh my God. Who are we then? Age UK Wirral is an independent, local and autonomous brand partner of Age UK. Over on the Wirral, we deliver about 80,000 interventions a year through a wide range of services, predominantly to older people. But since 1984, we've had a particular specialism around working with people with dementia. And that's both through daycare and day opportunities for people over the age of 65 living with a diagnosis, but also support and day services for people under the age of 65 who've been diagnosed with early onset dementia. We have an extensive carer support service, a domiciliary home support service, and also a small residential care and respite centre. 3 or 4 years ago, when we first met Fiona and Graham, we'd started to experience some real challenges with people that we were working with. Today, I've got staff who are working with people that were born in 1914 and people that were born in 1964 within the same dementia service. Those people have had completely different childhoods, they've got completely different memories, they've lived through completely different experiences. Even within the same generation cohort, we're seeing people that have got very, very different expectations and who've lived very, very different lives. When it comes to more traditional reminiscence activities, reminiscence rooms, for example, we're working with people that have got completely different tastes, styles, memories, people whose parents and grandparents' houses would have been decorated very, very differently. And we were starting to really struggle to undertake meaningful reminiscence activity with that very diverse range of people that we were seeing coming through our doors. Added to that, we had the additional challenge of some very specific support needs around the younger people with dementia that we were working with, those people in their 30s, 40s and 50s who'd received a very early diagnosis. We were finding that the group dynamics within both our early onset service and also our 65 plus service, where we had some people who were 66 and some people who were 101, were becoming very challenging and very hard to manage. And it was becoming very difficult to continually recycle and reuse the existing activities and resources that we had. And I think things were becoming a little bit stale and we were looking for some very fresh ideas. We've also seen in the last particularly 3 or 4 years a real change in terms of the stage at which people are coming to us and receiving a service. When I first started working with dementia and older people 15, 16 years ago, within day services, we'd see people who were mild and pleasantly confused. Nowadays, those people wouldn't qualify for a day service. What we're seeing today coming through to day services are people that 5 years ago probably would have been living in a long-term care home, but actually now are being supported to live in the community and are being supported to come and access day services and day opportunities. But it does make that whole process of engaging with them for reminiscence much more difficult and much more challenging. One of my colleagues came across Fiona at a conference and came back raving about this big TV screen thing, as she called it. And so we invited Fiona to come along and demonstrate the unit to us. And we took along to that session one of the gentlemen we were working with who had a diagnosis of early onset dementia, a gentleman called Ron. Very outspoken member of our daycare group. He was one of the founding members of our early onset service. And he was probably one of the most difficult to entertain people within the group. He had a very, very short attention span. He had very little interest in engaging in activities, but an awful lot of physical energy. Ron absolutely loved the system. He completely fell in love with it, and within 5 or 10 minutes was completely hooked and engaged in a fascinating conversation with Fiona about memories that he hadn't even previously shared with us. That somewhat sold it to us, and we signed up straight away. And we purchased 2 units and 4 tablets to split across our 2 main sites. We had a series of training sessions. Fiona came along, trained some of our staff and volunteers, and then we very much hit the ground running with the units. And the impact over the last 3 years has been really quite significant. In terms of our workforce, our staff and volunteers, they've absolutely run with it. It's not needed any directive. We've not had to keep reminding people. They were at a stage where this was exactly what they were looking for. And I think one of the reasons it's been so successful is that it's so incredibly easy to use. And it's something that for even the biggest technophobe, it's impossible to break it unless you drop it and jump up and down on it. So it's perfectly safe for people to play around with it, explore it, find their way around, and there's always a button that will take you back to the start. It's captured people's imagination because it's something different, so it became a talking point, it became a discussion point. People asked questions about what that unit on the trolley was, so people were naturally quite interested in finding out more about it. It provided that much needed new resource, and what staff were telling us was it straight away opened up far more choice and opportunity in terms of how they could configure both individual care and support plans, but also group activities as well. And after the first couple of weeks, what staff were saying is that it was actually making their day job easier. It actually meant they were looking forward to certain sessions during the day where previously they'd become frustrated or worried that they perhaps weren't offering the right amount of choice to people. And an interesting offshoot of that was for many of our care assistants, they wouldn't actually use IT in any part of their daily role whatsoever. And in fact, a lot of our care assistants were probably quite digitally excluded. And as a result of you introducing Thingy, there's an awful lot of them that have gone away and actually taken up an interest in digital activity, or have gone away and actually purchased their own iPads, iPhone, things like that. So it's really increased the staff and volunteers' confidence around using digital things as well. The staff have told us that they feel now that reminiscence activity is of a much better quality, and that is through the much better visual prompts, the ability to follow someone's memories in real time. So that on a particular day at a particular time, if something sparked a particular memory with someone, being able to search and bring up footage, visual things, audio things straight away, and actually follow that person's reminiscence journey, rather than perhaps getting out the maritime memory box and the whole of that session only being about maritime memories because that's what the particular box is. So we've been really able to follow the person's journey and make it very, very individual. It's also helped because the richness of resource that we can bring up, being able to see and hear things, has sparked off other memories and generated much deeper reminiscence than we'd found we'd had previously with things just like memory boxes. We very much talk about our jigsaw of care within the organisation. People with dementia that we work with will often move between several different parts of our services. They may come to us for dementia daycare. We may have staff that go out and provide domiciliary care to them at the weekend. Once a month, they may come and spend a weekend in our respite centre, and ultimately they may end up living with us if they need residential care. What the system's been able to do is, as they move between all of the different parts of our services, the system records what works best with them, what their preferences are, what works best for that individual, and it's actually enabled us to provide much better person-centred care because it's meant that staff in every part of the organisation are able to get to know that individual much better and much more quickly. In terms of service users, tell us they've really enjoyed the different opportunities. And I think for some service users, they've surprised themselves in terms of how much they've enjoyed things like pig racing. We hear fits of screaming laughter coming from our Bradbury wing now when our early onset group are pig racing against each other. The most unlikely sport, the most unlikely thing, we'd have never ever thought of introducing pig racing, but they've really become quite competitive. It's something that both men and women have engaged in, and it's completely changed the dynamics of that group. Service users, we're seeing much better individual and group interaction, and we've seen some real changes in terms of those members of the group on a particular given day that may have been less confident, may have been quieter, may have always taken a back seat, because the system is so accessible, because it's something that anybody can actually use, that when we're using it in a group setting, we're seeing some of those quieter individuals actually stepping forward, actually taking the lead, actually taking charge. It's really brought some people out of their shell. It's helped other people who used to dominate group settings actually learn about how to play an equal part in a group dynamic. And we're seeing now far more person-centred activities. We're able to learn about the things that particular individuals really enjoy doing and do more of that with them. And we're able to learn about the things that they absolutely hate. And we're able to make sure that we don't do that with them. We've also found that it's provided a much needed alternative way for people to express their interests. Through being able to search for different things, through being able to expose people to such a wide range of memories, of music, of words, of pictures, we're learning at a much deeper level about what motivates individuals, what they particularly like, what they particularly dislike. And that's then contributing to everything from the menu choices that we offer people for their meal times, through to trips and outings that they've been on. It really has changed the way in which we understand who the individual is and how we've been able to support them to express that. It's given people living with dementia a much greater confidence in using digital media. And that's led on to all sorts of benefits in terms of improving their relationships with their family members. And we've certainly seen several examples where grandparent and grandchild have been able to really come together and engage, because it's really, really cool that granddad can actually use an iPad, which is how a lot of grandchildren are seeing it. And that's meant that they've been able to engage in some fun times together, to have some proper grandparent-grandchild quality time with each other. It's enabled grandchildren to better understand about the dementia that their grandparent is living with. And we've seen as a result of that, family members going and buying their parents a tablet for Christmas or birthday, and actually encouraging them to do more than just perhaps sit at home when they're not at daycare and watch the TV, because that's been the easy option previously. The freedom of the touch screen has had significant impacts, particularly where we've got people who struggle with their functional abilities. The touch screen, we've actually seen it's helped coordination for several people, and it's increased their functional ability. And we've learned a lot through, we have a lot of service users now who will come in the morning and wander over to the unit and just start using it themselves. And particularly in terms of music and the music that they choose to play, we're actually using that now as a predictor of where they're at that particular day, what sort of mood they're in that particular day. And with a couple of clients, it actually enables us to be aware of the direction of travel that day may take for that particular individual. Particularly music choices are telling us in advance about how that person's feeling on the inside that they might not actually be able to verbally express, and we're able to work then differently with them and configure that day's support according to that mood. So we've seen those real change dynamics that I mentioned earlier. We've seen a lot more people wanting to participate in activities rather than just wanting to sit and spend a day in the room with us. We've seen a lot of reduced anxiety. The use of the units, the enjoyment that people get out of the range of activities available has significantly reduced anxiety levels amongst our daycare service users, and we've seen a significant reduction in the number of people asking when their loved ones coming to pick them up or what time they're going home. We've seen much greater confidence and self-esteem with people. The the increase in confidence that someone gets when they realise they can actually navigate the unit themselves, when they can actually find things themselves, the absolute look of surprise and then delight that we saw on a 90-year-old lady's face when she actually managed to make the unit speak to her was just priceless. She was absolutely delighted with herself. And we've seen far more laughter. And laughter has actually been something that can be incredibly difficult to artificially generate within a dementia daycare setting. But actually through using the unit, through people doing things on their own, as a group of a couple of people or as a large group, people are actually enjoying themselves and genuinely having fun and genuinely laughing. And it's something that a lot of the rest of us probably take for granted and do at several points of every day. It's been really useful for redirecting people who've become unsettled or stressed. It's been a very useful tool as a distraction technique. And we're seeing increased cognitive skill as a result of some of the engagement in activities. It's giving people an increased stimulus to actually engage in conversation. It's sparking different memories. One of the staff described it very much as a firework exploding, that once one memory's lit, it's taking people on completely different journeys and you're getting all of these lights coming off it. In terms of carers and family members, it's somewhat changed the relationship between us as an organisation and carers and family members, but also the relationships between families themselves. Because it's enabled carers, family members, loved ones to find areas of common interest with the person with dementia. It's helped them to stop seeing their loved one as the dementia and actually reminded them of the person that individual is. And it's given them some real opportunities to take part in some fun times together, to take part in some hobbies together, to take part in some social activities together, which is often something that when you've become so embedded in caring for somebody with dementia, it's very easy to forget how to do that. It's stimulated discussion about the past. It's brought back memories that people had forgotten about their parents, their grandparents' hobbies, background, interests. And it's really given family members some reassurance. There's so much guilt attached with either taking your loved one to a daycare centre and leaving them, or taking them to a respite centre for a few days, or watching them move permanently into residential or respite care. And what family members are telling us is that the reassurance of knowing that there's a genuine understanding of who their mother is, who their father is, who they've been during their life and who they're going to be in the future makes a significant difference. We actually have used the system with a lady whose daughter and an only relative lives in America, and the difference that's made to the quality of their relationship has been absolutely huge. We're able to Skype through to America through the system so that Izzy can see her mum, she can speak to her mum, she's able to see for herself how her mum's doing, how her mum looks. We've been contributing to and building Izzy's life book, and it's given when Izzy comes over to, they're both called Izzy, which is quite confusing, but when Izzy Junior comes over every 6 weeks or so from the States, she's able to take part in these activities with her mum and add to the life book. If we get to a particular stage in the life book and we're struggling, we're not quite sure about what Izzy Senior is trying to articulate with us, we're able to Skype Izzy Junior, she's able to get involved. It's made a massive, massive difference to the point where a CQC inspector actually referred to the difference that the unit and the Skype and the life book had made in this particular example. The activities, the games, the music, the TV shows worked exceptionally well within our day settings. We very quickly became quite concerned about the amount of time that it took to build the collages and the life stories. And that was the area that we were really, really quite passionate about. We've been a huge advocate of life books for many years, ever since we went to the funeral of a gentleman who died relatively young. He was 67, and the only thing that was said at his funeral was he liked to play cards. there was nobody left around and actually knew anything about that person, who he was, who he'd been and what he represented. So for a number of years, we've encouraged people to build and contribute to paper life books. But the whole concept of the electronic life book, the electronic life story, really appealed to us. But we knew that we needed some very dedicated resource to actually work with people to build these life books. Not long after we'd invested in the units, Comet Relief brought out some money as a result of the Panakowa initiative, which was a Department of Health and Comet Relief initiative looking at preventing institutional neglect and abuse in care homes. And one of their aims was around funding projects that would improve relationships between staff and residents within care homes and the wider community. And funding projects that very much put people's desires and experiences at the heart of care that they received. And to us, that was exactly what the Life Book was all about. So we applied for a very small pot of money from Comet Relief, which has given us a worker for a year to work with those people that live with us to build their life collages and then to work on building their life books. And that process has been absolutely phenomenal. It's completely changed the atmosphere within our residential centre. It's become a selling point for our services. There are people who have approached us and asked to come and live with us specifically because they've heard about that project. Our care staff tell us that they're providing care completely differently because of their enhanced level of understanding and knowledge about the individual that they're supporting. One of the staff commented the other day that in previous homes they've worked in, it's often been an effort to try and start conversation in the morning because they knew such limited information about an individual, and an individual had perhaps difficulties actually engaging in conversation, and that it became quite laborious to keep trying to start the same old conversation in the same old way. They've said the difference about working within our home is the fact that they know so much about that individual that they actually don't have time to cover all the different aspects of that person's life. And that through the collages, through the life books, there's always something different that they can start a conversation with and engage in some stimulating dialogue with an individual. We've worked individually with people on their collages and life books. We've also done group work with individuals. And what we've seen as a result of all of that is, and we all know what it's like when you go and visit somebody in hospital. The first 2 days, you can just about find enough to talk about. By day 3, you're kind of walking in with that sense of dread of what are we going to talk about for the whole hour today? And it's the same old things. Has everyone been nice to you? Have you had anything to eat? What was the food like? Is there anything I can get you? You're sitting there hoping that the person in hospital says, yes, can you go downstairs and get me something so you get 5 minutes off the ward? And it's very much the same for family members coming to often visit people living in long-term care. They get to a point where they run out of things to talk about. It becomes very difficult to engage in new conversation. We now encourage relatives, family members to come in and as part of their visits actually take part in contributing to the life books, to sit and start adding in new memories. And that's been absolutely fantastic because it's changed the whole dynamic of the visits. We've then started finding that one family's working with another family and sharing memories, and it's just had this knock-on effect constantly throughout the whole of the home. Very positive feedback from that process. Individuals themselves, we're observing that it's a very cathartic process for them. We had one lady who actually disclosed in the course of working on her life book that she'd lost both of her twin sons within 6 months of each other a number of years ago. She'd never ever spoken to anybody about it because she was always scared of upsetting her daughter, who'd found it very difficult to deal with. And through the process of building her life book, the absolute joy that this lady got out of being able to remember her sons and record her son's life as part of her legacy was incredibly, incredibly important to her. The project was so successful within our care home that we then looked at rolling it out in a particular retirement village that we work with that exists for former seafarers. We were already engaged in this retirement village called Mariners Park. I don't know whether anyone has an experience of working with former seafarers, but particularly former male seafarers move back to dry land with often a whole host of exclusion issues. There's often been a history of drug and alcohol issues. They often have very poor health, significant difficulties actually settling in one place, often lacking in basic skills. So we've been working around a number of health and wellbeing interventions for many years at Mariners Park, but there's been a rapid increase in the number of former seafarers being diagnosed with dementia over recent years. So a couple of years back, there was a new build dementia care home at the park specifically for former seafarers. The Merchant Navy Fund actually gave us the money to buy a unit, a tablet, and to fund a staff post to work specifically with merchant seafarers at the park to record their living history. And this has been absolutely brilliant because it's recording history that otherwise may have been lost. We have met people who have taken part in the most incredible things, lived through the most unbelievable situations, whose experiences would otherwise have died with them. It's enabling as well the non-maritime staff who are providing that care and support to these individuals to have a much greater appreciation of what motivates these people, how they've lived their lives, what's been important to them, and has completely changed the dynamic and the dialogue that they're able to have together. That project's still in its relatively early stages. We're about three or 4 months in, but already the stuff that's coming out of it is absolutely fascinating and something that we hope we can continue moving forward. I think in summary then, for us working in the community with people, Thingy has been absolutely brilliant. I think our only regret is that we haven't been able to buy more Thingies and that we haven't been able to fund more staff posts to work with Thingy. Listening to people talk since I arrived this morning, and particularly I think the Marie Curie presentation really hit home with me. One of the big values to us about being able to do this electronically is that you can keep adding to it. Whatever point somebody touches your service, whether they're a patient in your hospital, whether they're receiving treatment from you, whether they're at the end of their life and receiving palliative care, or whether they're coming to us for a service and at the start of a journey, people have still got a life ahead of them as well as a life behind them. And what being able to record life stories electronically does for us is it enables us to keep adding to it. So it's not just about what's gone on previously, it's also about recognising what goes on in the future. I think we've all recognised today together the value of this type of activity. And I think there's something really important for us in terms of, and I said this last time when I spoke at the Warwick event, Fiona and Graham talk about the moral obligation. Well, I think there's a moral obligation for all of us to encourage this type of work, this type of thinking with our own friends, our own family members. There is something really quite special about really understanding who an individual is and recording legacy, recording life history, recording those experiences, because you never ever know when that person won't be there anymore to actually share it for themselves. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.